Hey, social studies buddies. I want to take a minute to kind of go over our ancient Egyptian religion notes today. Yesterday, we went over these first 11 slides. We went into breakout rooms and we answered these questions. And for your asynchronous time, you were supposed to go back and look at these questions and be able to answer them. I don't really need you to write them down or turn them in, but really, these are the type of questions that I will turn into test questions, hypotheticals, and all that good stuff. Remember, there's a lot of things to review and study for this unit, a lot of stuff going on. Kind of where we're going to start today. So, look, I kind of start you out with some videos and such. Watch these at the end because they're going to bring everything back together. Or you can watch them at the start, whichever. If the brain pops don't work, the links, just log into brain pop and JMS is the login, Jaguars is the password, and search Egyptian pharaohs and mummification. They'll come up. They're like 3-minute videos. How a Mummy Was Made is a little animated short from YouTube, kind of a cool video just explaining how mummification worked. So kind of what we're going to talk about today is Egyptian religion. And the first thing we kind of got to do is define what a religion is. And religion is the belief in a supernatural power considered to have control of human destiny. And religion tries to answer three main questions. How were humans created? What is the meaning of life? And what happens when we die? This is really where I want to spend the bulk of time talking today and kind of relating it back to the Egyptians and what they believed. And we'll kind of talk about what we think and what we believe, or what we think. Not Yeah, and that's to make a broad sweeping generalization. There's much, much more that goes into religion, and we will study it in a unit coming up. But I just wanted to kind of be clear that, we got to define it and kind of further discover what it is. So when we look at religion, the Egyptians, it's kind of like the big thing is polytheistic versus monotheistic. This has been on our vocabulary since Unit 2, so we kind of got to know what this means by now. Poly, Latin for many, meaning the belief in many, many gods. Mono means one, and it's the belief in one God. And we'll kind of talk about this today because towards the end of the Egyptian dynasties, we saw, oh my God, why am I looking out the window to do this? We saw the introduction of the Hebrew culture, which would end up coming into the Jewish faith, right? And that's monotheistic versus polytheistic. And we'll talk about that during class, but it's very, very important that you're able to distinguish the two of these. So in Egypt, they believed in many, many gods and goddesses. There were over 2,000 different gods. And even sometimes like famous people, like people that did a lot of really good stuff, after they died and they were buried and mummified, they would become gods and goddesses after their death. So the Egyptians believed that some gods lived in the sun, some lived in the Nile, some lived in the water. So of these gods, they would come down to earth and they would take human form or animal form. Really, really similar to the Greek and Roman gods. And we'll kind of talk about this in class, but one of the main things we need to take away from this is that the Egyptians were polytheistic. All of their gods and goddesses dealt with nature and the afterlife and the connection between humans and that. They believed that gods controlled the forces of nature. They believed that gods control life and death. Gods identified with certain animals, and even that everybody has what's called a ka, which is like a spirit or a life force that would leave the body after death. Other religions might call this a soul, right? So it's nothing I don't think we haven't heard of. I'm just using a different name. Now look, I'm kind of being funny, Mr. O'Neill, to myself, ha ha ha, by putting this picture of Mr. T here, but I kind of wanted to explain this. Egyptians believed in life after death. It's a little bit different than the way Christians or Muslims or people of the Jewish faith believe it today, but the Egyptians believed that when you were buried, you had to be buried with everything that you need. You had to be buried with everything you would need for the afterlife. So when archaeologists and historians uncover some of these ancient tombs that have been closed for thousands of years, they find jars of honey, they find jars of wine, they find gold, they find beautiful paintings, they find all of these beautiful decorations because the Egyptians believed that room, that place, that's where they would spend their afterlife. So that's why people are often buried with treasure or clothing or valuable objects. And like Mr. T is an actor from the early 80s, late 80s, 90s. And he was on a show called The A Team. He was in a bunch of Rocky movies. But one thing that made him famous was he wore like gold all the time. And it's kind of a joke that the Egyptians were buried like Mr. T, meaning they were just covered in jewels, covered in gold. And I linked two videos to kind of show y'all who Mr. T was, because he was no nonsense. Mr. T was no nonsense, and it's evidenced by this first video, but he was also a very down to earth, realistic person, evidenced in the second one. This is just kind of Mr. O'Neill being funny. But the Egyptians did mummify their dead. This gave them a huge insight into human anatomy and the different systems that help humans survive. So they preserved the bodies through mummifications. They believed that once they died, they were sent to the underworld for the next life. Just because it's underworld doesn't mean it's like hell. Like everybody's going to hell, but like heaven is up here and hell is down there. That's kind of a Judeo-Christian belief. Whereas the Egyptians, everyone went to the underworld where Horus would weigh your soul against the eternal feather. And that's kind of a story you're going to learn on your own. But it was a different process. So what I want you to kind of do on your notes is you're going to go through these on your own, and you're going to kind of write the name of the god, what they're the god of, and a few kind of interesting things about them. So I give you Isis, Horus, Ra, or Re, Set, Osiris, and that's it. You're able to look up a few on your own if you want. Yeah, so you're just going to kind of describe a few of the gods and goddesses. And just looking at the notes, everything is in order and explained in there. You do not need to turn this in, but this 100% will be on your test next Tuesday. So please take time to review these notes, go over them, and kind of jot down what we do in our class discussion. This is going to be the end of the screencast. Please refer to Mr. O'Neill's Canvas for any questions.